When you create a pivot table from the Insert menu, the top section of the Create Pivot Table dialog box provides three options: getting the data from an Excel table or range, getting the data from an external data source, or getting the data from a data model. The current video discusses the second option. The workbook you see here is completely blank. I will insert a pivot table in the usual way. When I select the Use an External Data Source option, I must then click the Choose Connection button. This takes me to a list of existing connections. Of course, your list will be different from mine. As you can see, there are three possible locations for the connections: in this workbook, on a network, and on this computer. In addition, you can browse for more. The question is what a connection really is, and why this particular list shows up on my computer. Let's just say that there are a lot of possibilities, as you can see when I click Browse for More and look at the list of data source extensions. There are two basic types of connections. First, a connection can be to a data source itself, such as an Access stored query in an MDB file, a SQL Server database table, or even a table in an Excel file. Alternatively, a connection can be to a small text file in some obscure folder on your hard drive that contains information about the data source and points to it. These small connection files can have various extensions, including the extension ODC, which stands for Office Data Connection, DSN, which stands for Database Source Name, and IQY or OQY, where the QY stands for Query. You don't have to understand the contents of these files or even look at them, but you should realize that they include information about your existing connections. Where do these text files come from in the first place? Note that when I click Browse for More, there is a New Source button. This takes me to a dialog box. From here, I can select a source type and then specify information about the source. This information is then stored in a small text file on my hard drive, and the connection shows up in my list of connections from then on, so that I don't have to specify the information about the data source each time I want to use it. Again, the number of possibilities is quite large, but I will conclude this video by providing two typical examples. In the first, I will base a pivot table on an existing connection in my list. This connection is to the shirt orders source. I created this connection earlier when I imported data from the shirt orders access file. Now all I have to do is choose this connection and a pivot table opens automatically. Then I can drag fields to the pivot table in the usual way. As a second illustration, I will base a pivot table on an Excel table named Orders in another Excel workbook called Customer Orders. This time there is no existing connection to the data source in my list, so I will have to browse for the file and then choose the table for the source. Again, a pivot table opens, and I can manipulate it in the usual way. In summary, if you want to base a pivot table on external data, and you want to do this from the Create Pivot Table dialog box, as opposed to using Microsoft Query or Power Pivot, for example, you will have to choose an existing connection you have already set up, or you will have to locate a new data source. The possibilities are almost limitless, so don't be afraid to experiment.